15 famous lavender marriages in Golden Age Hollywood. They looked like dream couples, but behind closed doors, they were protecting secrets that could have destroyed their lives and Hollywood itself. Lavender marriage, an arrangement between a gay celebrity and a heterosexual partner, was never about love. It was a smokescreen, a carefully crafted illusion to distract the public, protect reputations, and dodge the ever-looming threat of scandal. During the golden age of Hollywood, at least 17 such marriages were quietly orchestrated. Some rushed into marriage just 2 days after meeting. Others spent their entire lives with a spouse on paper, while secretly giving their hearts to a love the world was never allowed to see. And some relationships were so tangled they defy belief, like the case where both a mother and her daughter married the same man. One marriage involved a forged son, another ended with a funeral and no casket, another never happened at all. So who were they behind the flawless masks? What did they sacrifice to preserve their fame? The truth will shake everything you thought you knew about Hollywood's golden couples. These weren't just occasional arrangements made by desperate stars. They were calculated business decisions, strategic partnerships designed by studio executives, talent agents, and publicity departments to protect valuable investments. Let's examine 15 of the most significant lavender marriages in Hollywood history, arrangements that protected careers while hiding truths that could have destroyed the carefully constructed images of some of cinema's most beloved stars.
It's a good show, obviously. I mean, it's very popular all over the world. So why not to do?
Rock Hudson and Phyllis Gates, the 48-hour solution. Rock Hudson was the golden boy of Universal Studios, dubbed America's most ideal man with his towering height, broad shoulders, radiant smile, and a voice as smooth as velvet. Millions of women were glued to the screen every time he appeared. From magnificent obsession to all that heaven allows, he was the very image of masculinity. But just as he stood at the pinnacle of fame, Hudson's entire career nearly crumbled because of one name typed in the draft of a confidential magazine article. In the fall of 1954, senior editor Howard Rushmore of Confidential, the tabloid notorious for digging up secrets of the elite, received a bundle of documents from a former gardener who had worked at Hudson's Beverly Hills estate. It included handwritten letters, phone call notes, and a blurry photo of two men embracing in the dim light of a party hosted by director George Cukor. Rushmore muttered a sentence that stunned the entire newsroom. If this is real, we can bring down all of Hollywood. The machine moved with terrifying efficiency. Within 24 hours, Henry Wilson, Hollywood's most powerful agent and the very man who had discovered Hudson years earlier, was summoned to Universal executive offices. There, an unspoken agreement was drawn up. No denials, no defense. There was only one way out: crush the scandal with a marriage. And that's when Phyllis Gates entered the picture. She wasn't a starlet or an heiress. She was Wilson's private secretary, smart, discreet, and most importantly, untainted by any scandal. According to journalist Liz Smith, Gates once said, when asked to become a contract wife, "I don't know if this will really protect him from the storm, but if all it takes is a marriage certificate to give him some peace, then I'll sign." 2 days later, on November 9th, 1955, the wedding took place in Santa Barbara. No announcement, no reporters, no celebrity guests. A single Universal photographer was allowed to take exactly 5 pictures, including one of Hudson smiling directly at the camera as if he had just married the love of his life. But the true director behind this ceremony was Henry Wilson, who sat at the back of the church, never taking his eyes off his wristwatch. The entire ceremony lasted just 12 minutes. At the same time, Confidential magazine received an anonymous fax warning that if they continued to target Hudson, Universal would reopen sealed files about Rushmore's past tax evasion. The expose was shelved indefinitely. The scandal was silenced, but the price was immeasurable. Just 6 months after the wedding, Gates began living alone in a Westwood apartment. Hudson was always away on set and frequently appeared alongside female co-stars to divert attention. Their marriage grew so cold that even the press started to question it. By 1958, Gates filed for divorce citing mental cruelty. In the paperwork, she referenced betrayal of trust, but there was no lawsuit, no accusations. Hudson moved to a new house. Gates vanished from showbiz. The performance ended in silence. It wasn't until 1985, when Hudson appeared in public looking gaunt and frail, that the world realized he had lived under a cloud of fear for 3 decades. Years of false living, false love, false smiles, just to preserve a career. When asked years later whether she regretted marrying Rock Hudson, Phyllis Gates replied in a short interview, "I don't regret it, but I do feel sorrow for him. him, a man who was never allowed to live truthfully, to love truthfully, and in the end, he couldn't even die in peace. But just when the cameras turned off in one staged marriage, another illusion was being carefully constructed across town. This one involving two of Hollywood's most charismatic leading men.
I'm very grateful to the Academy's Board of Directors for this happy tribute. And
Cary Grant and Randolph Scott, the roommates who fooled America. Cary Grant's sophisticated image made him the definitive leading man for decades. Charming, elegant, and seemingly effortless in his perfection. Yet behind this flawless facade lay a complex reality that included significant compromises on his journey to stardom. For nearly 12 years, Grant lived with fellow actor Randolph Scott in a beach house in Santa Monica, a relationship that magazines at the time curiously described as inseparable companions and Hollywood's favorite bachelors. What makes this arrangement particularly remarkable is how openly they lived together. In 1934, Modern Screen Magazine ran a photo series titled Hollywood's Most Unusual Roommates, featuring the two men hanging laundry in the backyard, cooking together, and reading the Sunday paper side by side in matching armchairs. The studio system's approach to this living arrangement was fascinatingly contradictory. Rather than hiding it, they initially embraced it as charming bachelor behavior, evidence of Grant's carefree lifestyle before inevitably settling down with the right woman. A 1935 article in Photoplay, Riley stated, "If you want to learn how to maintain a marriage, ask Cary Grant and Randolph Scott. The only thing is, they're not married." Grant's numerous marriages, 5 in total, created a public narrative that deflected attention from questions about his personal life. This pattern of using conventional heterosexual relationships as career protection was common among stars of the era, regardless of their actual orientation or preferences. When pressures mounted in 1941, Grant married Barbara Hutton, one of the wealthiest women in America. The timing wasn't coincidental. It came just as his star was rising to unprecedented heights and scrutiny intensified. The marriage lasted just 3 years. What distinguishes Grant's navigation of this complex landscape was his exceptional skill at crafting a public persona so convincing that it eventually became inseparable from public perception of the man himself. The Cary Grant character, sophisticated, charming, slightly mysterious, served as both his greatest professional achievement and his most effective personal shield. Even after his split from Scott, Grant reportedly maintained financial support for his former roommate for years. In a personal diary leaked decades later, Grant's third wife, Betsy Drake, bitterly wrote, "I didn't marry a man, I married a shadow, and that shadow belonged to someone else." Grant never publicly acknowledged the nature of his relationship with Scott, but in his final interview before retiring, when asked if there was anything in life where he felt he was never truly himself, Grant simply smiled, looked at the camera, and said nothing. The silence spoke volumes, and while some found a way to live in the shadows, others paid a devastating price for stepping into the light.
Often when filmmakers decide that they're going to emulate a black and white film and produce either a second version.
Anthony Perkins and Barry Berenson, Living with Secrets and Ghosts. Anthony Perkins created one of cinema's most unforgettable characters in Norman Bates, the psychologically tormented antagonist of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. The performance made Perkins a star while simultaneously typecasting him in roles that emphasize psychological fragility and hidden darkness, an ironic parallel to his own complex relationship with the industry that both celebrated and exploited him. Behind the scenes, Perkins reportedly maintained a relationship with one of America's ultimate symbols of masculinity, Rock Hudson, a connection that remained hidden for decades. According to several biographers, the two met at a private party in Malibu, hosted by director George Cukor, long rumored to be a secret haven for closeted stars. Perkins was just over 20, skinny, shy, and always dodging paparazzi lenses. Hudson by then was already a box office king, tall, handsome, and always photographed with a beautiful actress by his side. In the quiet corner of that party, they were seen sitting next to each other for 2 straight hours, whispering and occasionally sharing quiet laughter. Over the next few years, they were spotted together multiple times, riding in the same car after screening events, renting a cabin together in Big Bear Lake, and sitting side by side at Montgomery Clift's private birthday party. By the early 1970s, the situation turned dangerous. Confidential magazine began publishing a series of exposés on the private lives of famous actors, and Rock Hudson was directly implicated. One editor reportedly wrote, "If Hudson goes down, the first one dragged along will be Anthony Perkins." At that critical moment, a marriage was arranged. Barry Berenson, a talented photographer and granddaughter of legendary designer Elsa Schiaparelli, was introduced to Perkins at a charity event in late 1971. Just weeks later, They began appearing together publicly, with tabloids running headlines saying Perkins has finally found the love of his life. But behind the scenes, a close friend of Barry later revealed in an interview, she knew everything. But Barry always said, I love him. No matter who he loves, I still want to be there to protect the rest of his life. They married in August 1973. The wedding was private. No media, no reporters, just a few relatives at a small Cape Cod estate. Their post-marriage life was unusual by Hollywood standards. They had 2 sons, but Perkins continued avoiding interviews while Barry sidestepped all questions about her husband. What makes this Lavender marriage particularly unique was the apparent genuine affection between Perkins and Berenson. Unlike many arrangements made purely for publicity, theirs evolved into a partnership based on mutual respect and understanding. Barry became not just a shield for Perkins, but a true companion in navigating a world that wouldn't accept him as he was. In 1992, Perkins died of AIDS, another victim of the epidemic that revealed so many of Hollywood's carefully guarded secrets. Barry stood by him until the end, protecting his privacy even as speculation swirled. In a cruel twist of fate, Barry herself died 9 years later, a passenger on American Airlines Flight 11, which crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001. At Perkins' funeral, Barry arrived with their 2 sons. A photo captured her standing still for a long time in front of his portrait, clutching a small item tightly. In a private conversation with a close friend years later, Barry reportedly said something deeply moving. I was the wife of a man who never really belonged to me, but I never regretted it because I knew that in the part of his life where he couldn't be himself, I was the place he could return to. Now we reach the midpoint of our journey, and it's time to reveal the most elaborate system of deception ever created in Hollywood's history. Vincente Minnelli and Judy Garland, the director's cover story. On a summer afternoon in 1944, inside Studio 5 at MGM, director Vincente Minnelli was seen adjusting the bow tie of Judy Garland. Just a small gesture, yet it was seized upon by the Hollywood press as the opening shot of one of the most cleverly staged marriages in American cinema history. At that time, Garland was already an A-list star thanks to The Wizard of Oz, while Minnelli had just made waves with Meet Me in St. Louis. In the newspapers, they were MGM's golden couple, but behind the lights, insiders had whispered for years that Vincente Minnelli was once a regular at gay bars in Greenwich Village during his New York days. According to the memoir of screenwriter Charles Walters, who had worked with both of them, Minnelli was once spotted at a private party in Malibu wearing a red velvet dress, fully made up and using the alias Vivian. Though the photos were hidden away, the incident was recorded in MGM's secret personnel files by studio boss Louis B. Mayer. When Photoplay threatened to bring the story back to light in early 1944, a plan was set in motion. Mayer summoned both Garland and Minnelli to his private office and delivered an ultimatum. If you two get married by June, I'll erase everything from the file. If not, neither of you will have a place here. The wedding took place on June 15, 1945, at Mayer's own home in Brentwood. No reporters, no celebrity guests, just a few agents and managers. A ceremony that lasted exactly 9 minutes. That evening, the couple was placed in a corner suite on the 5th floor of the Chateau Marmont overlooking Sunset Strip. But according to the hotel manager, Garland slept alone that night. Minnelli returned to the studio because of urgent business with the art director. The marriage lasted nearly 6 years, long enough for Hollywood to believe it was a true love story. They had a daughter together, Liza Minnelli, who would go on to become one of the world's most iconic musical theater stars, but she was also the final thread tying together 2 people who were never truly meant to be. In 1951, Garland discovered her husband was still seeing a French costume designer living in West Hollywood. After catching Minnelli stepping out of the Bel Air Hotel with this man at 3 a.m., she screamed at her manager, "I can't keep living like a mask anymore," and filed for divorce. The marriage ended quietly, but it left a deep mark on Garland's life. She began drinking more, became dependent on sleeping pills, and often referred to the Lavender trap, her phrase for the fake marriages designed to protect one's image. Yet Garland didn't stop there. Perhaps out of hurt, or perhaps out of stubborn hope that love could mend what was broken, she stepped into another marriage that would collapse even faster. The true tragedy is that both Garland and Minnelli were victims of a system that demanded they deny their authentic selves. For Minnelli, it meant hiding his sexuality. For Garland, it meant entering a marriage based on studio demands, rather than love. Their daughter Liza would inherit this complicated legacy, eventually entering her own Lavender marriage years later. And just when you think these stories couldn't get more complex, we encounter a wedding so strange it seemed designed for a movie rather than real life.
It's a wonderful day for a ride, darling. Aren't you glad I persuaded you? Because you really do like to ride, you know. You just...
Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor, no kiss at the altar. Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor's wedding on May 14, 1939, appeared on paper to be the perfect Hollywood romance. Two megastars always topping the golden couple lists in Photoplay magazine. But the deeper people looked, the stranger it got. Why did Stanwyck, 4 years older than Taylor, dodge every question about marriage throughout their 3-year relationship? Why was the wedding quietly held without notice at a small ranch in San Diego with only a few close friends? But what continues to stir whispers to this day is a seemingly small detail. There was no kiss during the ceremony. No kiss on the lips, no cake cutting, no dancing, and the honeymoon night took place in the old house of Taylor's mother, where he had lived during his youth, in a tiny bedroom with a portrait of his mother hanging above the bed. Barbara sat reading a book while Robert locked himself in the bathroom and didn't come out until morning. A hotel staff member later recalled, "I've never seen anyone go on a honeymoon and bring nothing but film scripts." Stanwyck had long been the subject of whispers in Hollywood about her close relationships with women, particularly her intense friendship with writer Marjorie Dean. Taylor, meanwhile, was MGM's golden boy, whose extraordinarily good looks made him the studio's most marketable romantic lead. Their marriage served multiple purposes. It silenced rumors about both stars, created a publicity goldmine for MGM, and satisfied moral clauses in both their contracts requiring them to maintain respectable public images. What makes the Stanwyck-Taylor arrangement particularly notable is how professional it appears to have been. By all accounts, they maintained mutual respect and even friendship throughout their marriage, despite its apparently non-romantic nature. They were, in essence, excellent business partners in the business of image management. In 1954, Confidential magazine boldly claimed that Taylor was a regular at private parties in Beverly Hills, exclusive gatherings where all the guests were stars who couldn't live their truth. As for Barbara Stanwyck, she earned the nickname the Iron Woman, and never mentioned her husband in any interview after 1945. The marriage lasted exactly 12 years. No children, no scandals, and not a single photograph showing them holding hands outside a film set. When they divorced in 1951, the statement simply cited incompatibility, perhaps the only entirely honest public declaration of their relationship. Just as one Hollywood illusion faded, another emerged, this one built not on studio pressure, but on genuine understanding and friendship. Cole Porter and Linda Lee Thomas, a partnership of minds. Some couples marry for fame, others marry to escape suspicion, but few are like Cole Porter, the musical genius behind more than 800 timeless songs, who chose marriage simply to preserve a lifelong friendship and protect his career. In 1919, at the Ritz Hotel in Paris, a seemingly chance encounter sealed their fate. Linda Lee Thomas, a wealthy and elegant woman, 8 years older than Porter, had just come out of a scandalous marriage to media magnate Edward Thomas, and Cole Porter, a young man with wise eyes and extraordinary talent, carried with him a secret he could never speak aloud. Just 2 weeks after meeting, they married at the American Church in Paris. No media coverage, no orchestra, no parents from either side. But that wedding, according to journalist Theodore White, felt like a pact between two souls who understood each other in a world that didn't allow them to be true to themselves. What makes the Porter-Thomas marriage unique among Lavender marriages is that it appears to have been based on genuine mutual affection and understanding rather than studio pressure or career desperation. Linda knew exactly who Porter was when she married him, and she chose to create a partnership based on companionship, shared interests, and mutual protection. For the next 34 years, Linda stood by Cole at every event, from the Broadway debut of Anything Goes to the aftermath of his horseback riding accident that left his legs nearly paralyzed for the rest of his life. She cared for him as a friend, a mother, an ally, but never as a lover. Because Cole, as many behind-the-scenes accounts later revealed, had numerous relationships with young male dancers and musicians throughout their marriage. A document discovered in Yale's archives in 2004 even recorded a letter Cole had written to Linda, "I love you the way a man loves freedom. You are my freedom." And when Linda passed away in 1954 from cancer, cancer, Cole did not attend the funeral. He shut his doors and saw no one for 3 weeks. Just 1 year later, he never wrote another song again. The Porter-Thomas marriage represents perhaps the most successful version of the Lavender marriage, one where both parties entered with open eyes, mutual respect, and a genuine bond that, while not romantic, provided both with companionship and protection in a world hostile to Porter's authentic self. They composed a life together, even if they didn't share a love song.
Thou art the chosen one. Matthias, take thy place amongst them.
Raymond Burr and Isabella Ward, The Fabricated Life. Raymond Burr dominated television screens as the unflappable Perry Mason and the wheelchair-using detective Robert Ironside. But behind that authoritative screen presence lay one of Hollywood's most elaborate fictional biographies, a life story almost entirely fabricated to hide his sexuality. Burr's official biography claimed he had been married 3 times. His first wife, Annette Sutherland, supposedly died in the same plane crash that killed actor Leslie Howard during World War II. His second marriage allegedly ended with his wife's death from cancer, and his son with Sutherland had reportedly died of leukemia at age 10. None of these tragic events actually occurred. There was no plane crash wife, no cancer-stricken second wife, and no son who died young. These were elaborate fictions created to explain why Burr, a handsome leading man, lived alone and was never seen dating. The only real marriage in Burr's life was a brief union with Isabella Ward in 1948, which lasted less than a year. This legitimate but short-lived marriage provided a foundation of truth upon which an elaborate architecture of fiction could be built. What makes Burr's case particularly fascinating is how he supplemented the fictional marriages with equally fictional military heroism. His official biography claimed he had been wounded at the Battle of Okinawa while serving in the Navy during World War II. In reality, he never served in combat. These fabrications weren't just random lies, they were carefully constructed to paint Burr as a heroic, tragic figure whose solitary life resulted from noble sacrifice and devastating personal loss rather than his sexuality. The fictional biography created a character that 1950s and 60s audiences could sympathize with and admire. Throughout his successful career, Burr actually lived with his partner, Robert Benavides, for over 35 years. They met on the set of Perry Mason in 1960, where Benavides was a young actor with a small role. They later went into business together, creating an orchid-growing business and a vineyard in California's Dry Creek Valley. The contrast between Burr's public fiction and private reality became even more striking after his death in 1993. He left his entire estate, worth millions, to Benavides, completely excluding his remaining family members. The world remembered him as Perry Mason, but he left everything to the man he was never allowed to name.
Cheating!
Don't shout.
I'm not shouting!
You are.
What am I going to do with you?
Charles Laughton and Elsa Lanchester, Art and Understanding. The marriage between Charles Laughton and Elsa Lanchester represents one of Hollywood's most complex and enduring partnerships, a union between a gay man and a woman who chose to stay with him despite fully understanding his sexuality. Laughton, who won an Academy Award for The Private Life of Henry VIII, met Lanchester in 1927 through London's theater scene. Their relationship began as a professional collaboration and friendship that eventually led to marriage in 1929, shortly before they moved to Hollywood. According to Lanchester's partially coded autobiography, Laughton was forthright about his sexuality before they married. She made the decision to proceed with the marriage anyway, creating a partnership based on mutual artistic respect and genuine companionship rather than traditional romantic love. What makes their arrangement particularly noteworthy is its longevity and apparent success. Unlike many Lavender marriages that dissolved once they had served their purpose of career protection, Laughton and Lanchester remained together for 33 years until his death in 1962. They appeared in multiple films together, including The Private Life of Henry VIII, Rembrandt, and most famously, Witness for the Prosecution. Their professional collaboration suggests a partnership that transcended the conventional boundaries of marriage. They were artistic collaborators, mutual protectors, and by most accounts, genuine friends who supported each other's careers while maintaining a private understanding about the true nature of their relationship. Lanchester never publicly disclosed the full details of their arrangement during Laughton's lifetime. However, in her 1983 autobiography, she offered carefully worded hints about Lawton's sexuality and the unusual nature of their marriage. The title itself, Elsa Lanchester Herself, subtly suggested a woman who maintained her own identity separate from her famous husband. After Lawton's death, Lanchester never remarried, suggesting that their bond, while unconventional, held genuine meaning for her. They created a marriage not of passion, but of something perhaps rarer, perfect understanding. When she died in 1986, she was buried beside him, united in death, as they had been in their unique life together.
I wanted to do this more than anything I've ever done. I consider it a great privilege and a great honor.
Danny Kaye and Sylvia Fine, the perfect professional partnership. Danny Kaye's manic energy, rapid-fire delivery, and extraordinary physical comedy made him one of America's most beloved entertainers. Behind his successful career stood his wife Sylvia Fine, a brilliant composer and lyricist who wrote much of Kaye's material. Their marriage lasted from 1940 until Kaye's death in 1987, but according to numerous sources, it was a relationship defined more by professional collaboration than romantic love. Rumors about Kaye's sexuality circulated throughout his career, with many suggesting he had relationships with men, including a long-rumored affair with Laurence Olivier. While these claims remain unconfirmed, what's clear is that the Kaye-Fine marriage functioned primarily as a creative partnership that benefited both parties professionally. Fine was the architectural genius behind many of Kaye's most memorable performances, writing the complex patter songs and tongue twisters that became his trademark. Their daughter, Dina, was born in 1946, but according to several biographers, the couple lived separately for much of their marriage while maintaining a united public front. What makes their arrangement particularly successful was how it served both parties' ambitions. Fine, a talented composer who might otherwise have remained behind the scenes in a male-dominated industry, gained recognition through her association with Kaye. Meanwhile, Kaye benefited from both Fine's creative genius and the respectable family man image their marriage provided. Unlike many Lavender marriages that existed solely for public consumption, the Kaye-Fine partnership produced tangible creative work that might never have existed otherwise. Their professional collaboration resulted in classic films like The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, The Court Jester, and White Christmas. Their daughter Dina later acknowledged that her parents' relationship was complicated, but maintained that there was genuine love and respect between them, even if it didn't always resemble a conventional marriage. The Kaye-Fine marriage represents a Lavender arrangement that transcended simple image management to become a genuine creative partnership, proof that these relationships sometimes evolved into something more meaningful than their origins might suggest. She wrote the music, he performed it. Together they created harmony, even if their personal lives played different tunes.
I had a dog once. He hated me. At last he bit me and I had him shot.
Marlene Dietrich and Rudolf Sieber, The Open Marriage. Marlene Dietrich, with her androgynous beauty and unapologetic sensuality, represented a challenge to conventional notions of femininity and sexuality from the moment she appeared in The Blue Angel. Her marriage to Rudolf Sieber in 1923 created one of Hollywood's most unusual arrangements, a legal union that provided cover for both partners to pursue their true desires. Dietrich and Sieber married when she was just 21, and they had a daughter, Maria, the following year. But the conventional aspects of their relationship largely ended there. By 1929, Sieber had begun a relationship with a Russian woman named Tamara Matul, with whom he lived openly on a poultry farm in the San Fernando Valley. Rather than divorcing, Dietrich and Sieber maintained their marriage as a legal fiction that benefited them both. Dietrich, who had relationships with both men and women throughout her life, found that her status as a married woman provided a useful shield against excessive scrutiny of her personal life. What makes the Dietrich-Sieber arrangement particularly fascinating is how openly they acknowledged their unconventional setup within their social circle. Dietrich would sometimes bring her lovers to visit Sieber and Matul at their farm, creating a remarkably modern extended family arrangement decades before such relationships became more accepted. The studio system initially tried to present Dietrich as a conventional wife and mother, but her refusal to conform to traditional expectations eventually became part of her mystique. Unlike many stars who hid their private lives, Dietrich incorporated elements of her fluid sexuality into her public persona, appearing in men's suits and kissing women on screen in an era when such behavior was shocking. Dietrich and Sieber remained legally married until his death in 1976, making theirs one of the longest-lasting marriages in Hollywood, despite functioning nothing like a conventional union. Their arrangement represents a Lavender marriage that evolved beyond simple career protection into a mutually beneficial partnership that allowed both parties to live authentically within the constraints constraints of their era. Their marriage wasn't a prison. It was a shelter where both could live freely, separate but legally united. These 15 stories represent just a fraction of Hollywood's hidden history, a system where marriage became a business arrangement, love became a publicity strategy, and authenticity was sacrificed on the altar of commercial viability. From Rock Hudson's hastily arranged wedding to Cary Grant's lifelong dance with public expectations, these arrangements reveal the extraordinary pressure placed on stars to maintain marketable public images regardless of their private realities. What makes these accounts particularly significant is how fundamentally they reshape our understanding of Hollywood's golden age. The romantic fairy tales that played out on screen were often matched by equally fictional romances constructed for the press, creating layers of performance that extended far beyond the boundaries of any film set. Perhaps most striking is how these arrangements varied in their nature and impact. Some, like Cole Porter and Linda Lee Thomas, created partnerships based on mutual understanding and respect that lasted decades. Others, like Rock Hudson and Phyllis Gates, crumbled quickly under the weight of their fundamental dishonesty. And some, like Charles Lawton and Elsa Lanchester, evolved into something more complex than simple deception. Creative collaborations and genuine companionship built on acceptance of each other's true selves. The psychological toll of these double lives manifested differently in each case. Some stars, like Raymond Burr, constructed elaborate fictional biographies to fill the spaces where authentic relationships should have been. Others, like Judy Garland, cycled through multiple marriages and relationships, searching for something real amid the manufactured images. And many, like Anthony Perkins, lived with the constant fear of exposure that haunted their every public appearance. In the end, these weren't just marriages, they were performances that never ended when the cameras stopped rolling. The legacy of these Lavender marriages continues to resonate through Hollywood and broader society. While the formal studio system that demanded such arrangements has long since collapsed, questions remain about how completely the pressure for marketable public images has actually changed versus simply evolving into less formalized expectations. Recent decades have seen dramatic shifts in how sexuality is understood and accepted in the entertainment industry. Stars who would once have been forced into Lavender marriages to protect their careers can now live openly in ways that would have been unimaginable during Hollywood's golden age. This evolution represents genuine progress, even as the industry continues to grapple with questions of authentic representation and inclusion. What's particularly poignant about these historical arrangements is recognizing that many occurred just one generation too soon. Stars like Rock Hudson and Anthony Perkins, who died as the AIDS crisis brought new attention to gay rights, lived just long enough to glimpse a changing world, but not long enough to fully experience it. One can't help but wonder how differently their lives might have unfolded had they been born a few decades later. Perhaps the most valuable lesson from these historical accounts is understanding how systems of oppression depend fundamentally on isolation, convincing each person that they are alone in their difference. The studio system's power to enforce Lavender marriages relied on the silence and separation of those who might otherwise have found community and courage together. This recognition helps explain why visibility and representation remain so vital in continuing the journey toward a more authentic and accepting culture. And yet, are we still asking people to hide behind illusions just under a rainbow-colored rebrand? When actors today are advised to keep certain relationships private for the sake of their marketability, how different is that from the Lavender marriages of yesterday? Have we truly progressed or just created more sophisticated masks? Lavender marriages, those carefully constructed illusions of domestic bliss, reveal the extraordinary lengths to which Hollywood once went to maintain marketable images for its stars. These arrangements weren't just about hiding sexuality, they were about creating and controlling narratives that audiences would buy, both literally and figuratively. Understanding this hidden history doesn't diminish the artistry or impact of classic cinema, but rather helps us appreciate the full humanity of those who created it, often at significant personal cost. The performances that continue to move us decades later emerged from real people navigating impossible choices between authentic existence and professional survival. These marriages, built on secrets and compromise, remind us how recently our society demanded impossible choices from some of its most talented members. They also help us recognize how far we've come and how vigilant we must remain to ensure that no one faces similar impossible choices today. What struck you most about these Lavender marriages? Were you surprised by any of the stars included in this list? Do you think Hollywood has truly changed or just become more sophisticated in how it manages stars' images? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you'll know when we release our next exploration of Hollywood's hidden history. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.